What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Meko, joined by my guy Morgan here. And Morgan, we finally got here. It's the first day of, well, technically NFL free agency. It's technically just the tampering period. But this is, again, the start of, what we can kind of expect before the season officially kicks off with, teams officially being able to talk to free agents and come to agreements on, at least verbal agreements on the contracts that they will be signing.
Yeah, and it was a flurry of moves today. Not necessarily from the Lions early on, but everyone else. A lot of teams were busy getting after it in free agency. But as we kind of expected, we knew Brad Holmes was going to be selective, and it made a couple moves. We're going to get into them. I'm excited. Probably, I think we agree. Maybe our favorite one was the first one, right? With bringing Graham Glasgow back in the fold.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's exactly where we can kind of start this conversation off with is with Graham, with the Lions being able to retain him for a fairly team-friendly deal. Going into free agency, obviously both offensive guards were primed to hit free agency. The Lions chose to keep Graham Glasgow. I believe it's a 3-year deal worth up to $20 million. Again, very team-friendly, especially when you start to look at some of the other contracts that some of these offensive guards were hitting or getting, once free agency kind of kicked off. So, Morgan, for you, what does this kind of signal to you in terms of the Lions keeping Graham for the foreseeable future?
I think it just signals like Graham performed really well last year. He was one of the best right guards in football, according to a lot of different metrics. And he just offers positional versatility on the inside. Like if Frank misses a game and you don't have anyone else, Graham's not going to like it, but he can fill in at center. He can play either guard spot. So it tells me, Brad Holmes is being wise with how he's spending his money. I know we're going to get into it in a few, but Jonah got a big old bag. Good for him. Excited for him. But yeah, you get Graham back 3 years. I think it's, there's an out after 2, I believe, depending on, how things are shaking out there. But yeah, it's a good move, and it sets you up. Like if they're probably going to take an interior offensive lineman with one of these early picks, just because it's a need. And Graham can fit in on either side of Frank, depending on what the rookies bring to the table, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I again, combing through Twitter as this news kind of broke, you got some people talking about how this was a steal, how this was such a big move. To me, like the best way I could describe this move as it was a no-brainer, right? Like going into free agency, you were going to have to pay one of those two guys. It felt like wishful thinking on my part that they would be able to get both, but I think we all were kind of the same mindset that they were going to have to choose one of these guys, and Graham always felt like the more likely option, just considering the fact of the deal that he was coming off of, how many years he's been in the league, his age, that they would have a better chance of getting him at a team-friendly deal. And kudos to Brad Holmes for doing that. And again, I don't know how much pushback he probably got from Graham's representation. It really felt like Graham wanted to be here last year, and they are able to keep him for another year. Or another few years, sorry.
Right. Yeah. And, he obviously has a relationship with Decker and Ragnow, and now the rest of the offensive line knows Hank Fraley. So, yeah, I'm excited to have Graham back in the fold. And it goes a long way in solidifying the Lions' offensive line going into 2024, right? Like you wanted to keep a good thing together, and while they're losing one piece, and I know we're about to talk about him, they're, keeping Graham in the fold is big, right?
Yeah, and we can kind of transition over to Jonah. And I'm going to try not to be a salty Sally here about losing Jonah. I was very much on the side of things of like, I would have paid Jonah, honestly, the money he got. I think Jonah is absolutely worth every penny that he's about to get over with the Los Angeles Rams, reuniting with Matthew Stafford and really kind of putting together a solid, group over there in LA with, them keeping keeping Jonah Jackson, keeping Kevin Dotson, and just really starting to have a young offensive line that they can kind of have to kind of put in front of Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, and it's a good, you're going a long way to solidifying that line in front of Matthew Stafford, right? Like I love that move for them. As annoying as some of their fans were after the Lions beat them in the playoffs, still hoping the Rams do well. If they want to come back to Ford Field and lose again, that's fine. We're cool with that. But yeah, I'm excited to see him. He gets paid. It was like 3 years for 51 mil, right?
Yeah,
The raw
something like
numbers.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's high, but again, I do agree with you, Miko. Like, he's worth it. If the Lions weren't paying, if Decker wasn't on such a big contract right now and Frank, it would be much more palatable. But I understand why Brad Holmes, allowed this, let this happen. And at the end of the day, it's good for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, again, very thankful for everything that Jonah did here. I think, again, in his time in Detroit, he was a pro's pro, right? Never in any trouble, never really causing any issues in the media or in the locker room. And I think deserves, a huge round of applause on the way out for everything that he stood for while he was here in Detroit. Went through the good years, went through the bad years as well. So best of luck to Jonah, as he kind of heads out over to the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, wishing him all the best.
So, with that said, though, Morgan, that does leave a hole at left guard, and you kind of hinted at it earlier. What do you think is the best way for the Lions to kind of go about trying to fill that gap now that, on the unit that is, head and shoulders by far the best unit on this team, which is the offensive line? Now there's a gaping hole there. How do you foresee them kind of trying to fill that?
I do think they're still going to sign a veteran. It might not be a veteran that's going to get everybody really excited, but it's going to be someone who can, if need be, start at left guard for a period of time or potentially the whole season. If they do take somebody who's going to need some seasoning, or if their plan is to let Colby just develop another year, right? Sorsdal. So I do think they're going to sign somebody, be it tomorrow, Tuesday or Wednesday when the actual new league year begins on March 13th. I do think they're going to bring somebody in just because that's how Brad Holmes operates ahead of the draft. And yeah, I think it's smart because you want to be smart about that, the interior offensive line in front of Jared Goff and with that running game. But I think that's the way you got to attack it. And I would love if they signed a competent veteran and drafted somebody, just double down, right?
Yeah, I got to give a lot of kudos to, again, head honcho over here, Jeremy Reisman, for kind of putting this out on Twitter, but he kind of said the same thing in that he foresees, the Lions going out and getting a veteran, or at least filling that position so that when you go into the draft, even if you decide to draft a guard, you're doing it out of this mindset of okay, maybe you're looking to develop, maybe you're looking to, create some competition, but you're not doing it solely out of need. And kind of what you're saying, I think would be the best way of approaching this. If you're Brad Holmes and the Lions, is find you a guard that can play, next to Taylor, whether it's a veteran, whether it's a guy that's, again, maybe still on the younger side, or again, just somebody that, again, you just need somebody that can man that position and then still go into the draft, let the board fall to you. And if there's a guard that you really like, be able to get that person without feeling again, you have to go out and draft this position. And hopefully that sets up the team a little bit better going forward, not just for next season, but the future, long-term as well.
Yeah, exactly, Miko. And if you can get somebody that has some guard tackle flexibility, then you have someone who could potentially push that veteran that you're going to sign in free agency for the starting left guard spot. And then if that doesn't work, then they're your swing tackle, right? Backing up Panay, Sewell at right tackle and Taylor Decker at left tackle. So that would be ideal in my mind, just because then, those pieces are working. If you draft a Jackson Powers Johnson, eventually he slides in at center potentially if Frank Ragnow ends up retiring, and then Colby's at left guard, and then Panay moves to the left, and then you draft, right? So there's just a million ways to do it right. And I do like that it seems like Brad Holmes is always looking yes, he's looking at the here and now, but he's also looking at the, 2025, 2026. So
no, that's a really good way of putting it, right? And so that's the offensive side. And like you said, that was kind of how free agency started for the Lions. It was very much Graham Glasgow was the only signing at the time. We were, you had people dealing with the idea dealing with the fact that Jonah was moving on. And then after that, it was just kind of sitting and waiting and watching everybody else, kind of pick at the presents under the Christmas trees, so to say. But the Lions did make some moves at the time of this recording on the defensive side of the football, and two of those are really big moves in my opinion, Morgan. And I want to start with the first one that kind of broke, which is the Lions signing defensive end slash outside linebacker Marcus Davenport, who was recently with the Minnesota Vikings last year, but probably made his name, or probably made a name for himself from his time in the with the New Orleans Saints under Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn.
Yeah, and if you remember, he was in that 2018 draft class. He was taken 14th overall by the Saints out of University of Texas San Antonio, so the Roadrunners out there. But man, he posted some freaky deaky stats and some crazy testing times, and he shot up the draft board. He had some productive years in New Orleans. It's up to $10.5 million in incentives on a 1-year deal, so very much in the realm of the C.J. Gardner-Johnson deal that Brad Holmes pulled the trigger on last year. So yeah, Davenport, if he's healthy, I do think he's going to be productive on in Aaron Glenn's defense. He can play opposite of Hutch. He can move in and move around on the defensive line. He has some versatility there. And again, kind of like we were talking about at the re-signing Graham, this doesn't stop the Lions from drafting a Chop Robinson, a Darius Robinson, because as we know, you need waves of good players on the defensive line with the way the game's played today, right? Teams passing 40 to 50 times, you're going to need to get bodies in there. So adding a Marcus Davenport and a Chop Robinson, that would go a long ways to quelling some of these issues that the Lions have with rushing the passer, right?
No, absolutely. And again, the big question mark with Marcus Davenport is going to be health, right? You kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but like that's going to be the biggest question mark on this type of player. But again, you're only locked into a 1-year deal. Again, up to 10.5 million. It's about 6.5 million with just like his base salary. So again, not a heavy investment, and it's kind of the Brad Holmes approach to taking gambles on some of these veteran type pass rushers, where it's like, listen, we're going to give you a 1-year deal. We're going to see if you can carve a role for yourself into this team, and then we'll revisit it a year from now if you're somebody that's worth keeping long term. And Marcus Davenport to me is somebody that is definitely worth doing that with. 6'6", big defensive end. He has the size to play the run well. Hasn't had like the crazy sack production in his career, but he did have one season in New Orleans where he was able to put together a 9-sack season. You put that opposite Aiden Hutchinson, and I think that you could have something that's pretty dynamic in the terms of being able to get to the quarterback. The big thing for him, though, is just, again, can you keep him healthy and keep him on the field more so than he is just on the sidelines?
Yeah, and that's going to be, I think that's important too with the Lions, the way they're going to view him too. I don't think they're going to, have him out there for 100% of the, like, he's not going to be touching a Hutchinson snap share, right? Because that's where I think you might run into issues with his availability. So if he's rotating snaps with a Josh Pascal and a rookie of some sort, or, that's where we want it, right? That's where I think he's going to be productive, and you can, move him around and play different roles. He can really run, man. He ran a 4.58 coming out. So
looking at if you look at his combine numbers, they're very similar to Hutch, right? I mean, yes, he ran the faster 40, but their 10-yard split is basically neck and neck. He ran a 1.63. Hutch ran a 1.62. Their vertical jumps aren't that different. They're 3-cone. They're 20-yard shuttle. Like, they're very similar in their athleticism. And they're about the same size, right? I think Hutch is 6'5". Marcus Davenport is 6'6". They're both around that 260 mark, 260, 270 mark. So you're talking about two very big defensive ends that, again, what people have been really asking for is giving somebody opposite Hutch that can really that can cause some havoc. And I think Marcus Davenport can do that, barring that he's healthy, more often than he's not.
Yeah, and that's what you're trading, and that's why it's not like a long-term commitment either, right? Like if he had multiple years of production with 9 or 10 sacks, then he would be signing a long-term deal with somebody right now. But in a similar fashion as C.J. Gardner-Johnson, that's why you're getting him at a kind of a discount, right? Like a 1-year, kind of expensive, like middle of the road flyer. But yeah, I'm not. This is Brad Holmes' MO, right? Like, this is what he does. He's not going to stick his neck out too far. He will here and there.
Yeah.
sign the David Montgomerys and the Cam Suttons of the world. But other than that, I don't really. Yeah, I mean, I would be interested to see like how much interest the Lions had in like the Christian Wilkins and the big names of the world, because it's exciting, but man, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of money that you have to kind of invest into getting a player of that caliber. But speaking of which, the Lions did make, I think, a pretty reasonable investment in their next, offseason acquisition, which isn't a free agent signing, but again, still happened during this period, with them trading for Carlton Davis III from Tampa Bay. And this is outside of the Graham signing, this is probably like my next favorite move that the Lions have done so far, because we all kind of, again, going into the offseason, talked about how the Lions needed to find another corner. Kendall Vildor did his best, in limited action. Jerry Jacobs obviously won't be returning as of right now to the Lions, and obviously his play was very up and down. But you get a proven player, a Super Bowl champion in Carlton Davis, and it's only costing you a third round pick, Morgan. I think this is really good value.
Yeah, and Carlton Davis, has had several years of good production, throughout his young career. He was drafted in 2018 in the second round out of Auburn, 6'1", 206, very heady, intelligent corner. Like when you hear people talk about him around the league. There was a video today I saw on Twitter, Jamar Chase of the Bengals saying Davis was the best defensive back he's ever played against. So, some people are like, oh, this isn't the elite corner that, the Lions, we needed. This isn't Jalen Ramsey. Like that's the thing, right? Like there aren't a lot of Jalen Ramseys just growing on trees. Sauce Gardners aren't growing on trees. And if a team has them, they're probably not going to trade them, right? Barring some extenuating circumstance. So I think this is a good get. I was hoping the Lions would trade for like a Marcus Lattimore from the Saints. And honestly, this is a tick up, in my opinion. What do you think?
I think it's very similar, right? I think it's very much in line with what you would get. I think Marcus Lattimore is a little bit more of a CB1 for sure. And I think you and I were kind of talking about this before we started recording. Is the only question that I have about, again, signing Carlton Davis is, did you get a CB1 or did you just get another CB2? Because I think we both kind of agree that is probably what Cam Sutton is better served as your CB2. Obviously, Carlton Davis played that in Tampa opposite of Jamel Dean. It's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic shakes out here in Detroit, is if Carlton Davis can take that jump and clearly make a separation between him and Cam Sutton to say, like, no, he's CB1, and maybe that puts Cam Sutton in a few more favorable matchups on Sundays.
Right, and that's the thing, too. And I think having a Carlton Davis lined up with Cam Sutton, presents Aaron Glenn with more options, because it's two veterans who understand what you're doing. You can lean man one week, you can lean zone one week. And these two are going to be, they're going to, take it in stride. And again, I know this is getting redundant, but the Lions draft a corner, right? Mm-hmm. Carlton Davis and Cam Sutton are two good guys to learn from. And Carlton Davis is they traded for him. He's on he's got 1 year left on his contract it's $14.5 million. You would hope they extend him, just because the Lions did deal. The Lions sent a 2024 third, and the Bucs sent Carlton Davis and then a 6th round pick in 24 and then a 6th round pick in 25. So I would hope they would extend him, even if it's not, it's just like a 2 to 3 year extension.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, even if it's just like to help get that cap number a little bit,
shrink it a little,
or something like that.
Yeah, add a voided year, something like that.
Yeah, I think that would be, again, smart on Brad Holmes' part. But I think, again, like, I agree with you in the sense that this doesn't necessarily take corner off the board. This would actually be probably the prime situation to introduce a younger corner, younger outside corner, to learn from, again, two veterans, one being a former Super Bowl champion and being able to kind of do some of the same things that the Lions were able to do when they first drafted Darius Slay all those years ago, where he was able to, again, not immediately be thrown to the wolves and told to figure it out from week one, but actually have, opportunities to learn from a veteran DB group.
Yeah, and that goes a long way. And I think people kind of just like, scoff at it, like, oh, they're pro. No, that it helps, guys. Like, it helps to have some pros to learn from. Like, I know people are sour on Cam Sutton right now, but if you look at the tea leaves, right, like the Lions paid him 3 years, $33 million. It's 11 annually, 11 million average annually. That's not CB1 money. That was never the plan. I know me and Meko have said that several times on this channel. So Carlton Davis, I would say, I'd put him above Cam Sutton, but he's in that realm. I wouldn't say necessarily like Meko said, he's a true elite, like, CB1. But he's a damn good player, man, especially if he's healthy. And you're bringing Manny Mosley back, and you draft a rookie, all of a sudden that room's okay, right? Like, it's got some potential, right?
Well, and you're also, again, we talked about it with the Marcus Davenport signing, right? You're bolstering your defensive line, your pass rush, so maybe that makes life easier for your corners as well. If you don't have to blitz your safeties, if you don't have to come up with these exotic blitz packages where you can actually get pressure with your front four. There's a lot of things to kind of be excited about when it comes down to what this defense could be. But I do think, to your point, I think Carlton Davis, once we get into like OTAs, minicamp, it would not surprise me if Carlton Davis started to separate himself from Cam Sutton, started taking more of those, CB1 type reps. And if he's not the person that we're seeing come Sundays, lining up against the opposing team's best wide receiver.
Yeah, exactly, Meko. That's how I'd phrase it now. Like, if the Lions had to line up in this alternate reality of a world tomorrow and play the Cowboys again, I would feel better about Carlton Davis guarding CeeDee Lamb than I would Cam Sutton. Would I feel great about it? Either of them, no. It's because it's CeeDee Lamb, like we talked about. But you know what I'm saying?
But you feel better. Yeah, no, but I completely agree with you. You would absolutely feel better. And so...
Feel a little better.
Yeah. So yeah, that's going to kind of do it for the first day of, again, technically the tampering period of free agency. The league year doesn't officially kick off until Wednesday, right?
Yep.
I believe.
3/13, 3/13 day. I wanted to get that in there. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. So that's when all of these deals become official. The trade will become official. And we'll have a better idea of, again, who's going to be on this Lions roster, or at least a closer idea of like what of these veteran players are going to be on this Lions roster as we kind of march a little bit closer to the draft. The plan so far, I mean, honestly, if the Lions have some more big signings tomorrow, Morgan and I might be back tomorrow to recap some of those and kind of give our opinions on those. And then hopefully by the end of this week, we can kind of recap the division as a whole and talk about the NFC North and, what the landscape kind of looks like after that first wave of free agency. But with all that said, that's pretty much going to do it for us guys in this first video. Let us know in the comment section below. What do you guys think of the Lions moves on the first day of free agency? Which one is your favorite? Which one are you a little, skeptical of? Also, be sure to check out PrideDetroit.com, where you can check out all the latest articles and updates and catch any of the moves that are happening in free agency as quickly as we can kind of get them up on the website. Also, be sure to hit the notification bell and subscribe to this YouTube channel. That way you can be notified anytime we upload new videos or go live over here on YouTube. So with all that said, I'm Meko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll be sure to catch you guys in the next one.